We are clear to engage, over.
Welcome to the WolfCast, a podcast about the Wolf XM30, where we explore the purpose-built technologies, partnerships, and strategies shaping the next generation of combat for the United States Army. Hosted by General Dynamics Land Systems, this series brings you closer to the digital thread that connects, the open systems that evolve, and the people committed to delivering the power to win. Join us as we break down what's next for the Wolf, what matters, and what it takes to stay ahead. Share with your own pack and stay mission ready. I am very proud to have one of our XM30 team here to talk a bit about this. Give us your first name and what your professional background is and how long you've been on XM30.
Sure. So my name is Garrett, and I've been on XM30 in one form or another, going all the way back to 2019. So coming up on 7 years here. And when I initially started it, it was actually called something different. It was called OMFV, which stands for Optionally Manned Fighting Vehicle. And when I first joined the program, I was a mobility engineer. So I was working on the engine, the transmission, stuff that makes the vehicle move. And then over time, the program changed. And as it evolved, so did my role on the program. So I went from that to being a physical architect. And that's, kind of owning the overall CAD model and physical layout of the design for the turret specifically. And then coming up on 3 years ago, that changed again. When we got the award for this phase of the program back in 2023, I became the deputy chief engineer on XM30, which means that I have technical oversight over all of the IPTs. An IPT is an integrated product team. And some of those, for example, are like survivability, who we've already talked with. But there's also mobility, which I used to be, Vitronics, which is another word for vehicle electronics and lethality. And then on this vehicle, which is different from others, is also autonomy, which is kind of self-driving capabilities.
And autonomy is huge, especially as part of today's battlefield, and we will get there. I'm looking forward to talking about that. So your career journey is a really cool metaphor for helping people to understand how this process works, how you create this vehicle that works when it needs to work. And it's a multi-year process. It changes maybe day by day sometimes. But we adapt to those changes to come up with the solutions that soldiers need. That's what we do, and that's what nobody else in the world can do like General Dynamics Land Systems, which is why we're very proud to be doing this. So let me start here with a basic, question for folks who might be wondering. So this particular vehicle, right? So combat vehicles, I tend to think of them like tools in a toolbox, right? You've got a saw to do one kind of job and a hammer to do another and a screwdriver to do another. You can't really make a tool that does everything, so you have to have different tools for different jobs. What is the job? What is the solution that the U.S. Army needs done for XM30? What are they looking to have it do?
So what the XM30 fundamentally is a infantry fighting vehicle is typically what we call it. It's not just an infantry carrier, which takes troops in and gets out of the fight. It carries troops in the back, but it's also got a capability to stay around when the fighting's happening. So we have a capability to we have a pretty strong weapons system that we have on the turret. And then we also have, like we talked about with the survivability team, the kind of passive and active solutions that allow you to survive a high-intensity fighting environment.
And really, you hit the nail on the head in terms of this is a vehicle that augments the most important thing that's in the vehicle, which is the soldier, right? Yep. We begin and end with how does this vehicle help make that soldier a better soldier, help make that soldier safer, help give that soldier capabilities that they need to accomplish their mission. And I love the distinction that you pointed out between a carrier and a fighting vehicle, right? That the job doesn't end when the ramp goes down, right? This vehicle can provide technologies and solutions across a spectrum to help soldiers as they're doing what they need to do out there on the battlefield. So a lot of people who are familiar with this sort of thing, of course, the infantry carrier vehicle out there, that has such a venerable history as the Bradley fighting vehicle. Why is it that the Army is looking to replace the Bradley?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying there is nothing wrong with the Bradley, right? It is a really good vehicle. The main issue with the Bradley is that it was designed in a different time for a different time, and it's lasted really well over the life cycle, and every problem that could have occurred has occurred, and they figured out how to fix it. But we're talking here about a vehicle that was really designed like in the late 60s through the 70s and was first fielded in the early 80s. So like I'm saying, there's nothing inherently wrong with the Bradley, but it's more about the fact that the Army has moved on, technology has moved on, and they're really looking to replace some of the fundamental stuff that can't be retrofitted back onto the Bradley after the fact. So by that, I mean things like weight growth, right? There's an engine and a transmission and a suspension in the Bradley that have a weight rating. And as you add capability and stuff like that onto the platform, then it can't support that anymore. And there's other factors like that as well, like the electrical growth capacity that the power generation systems on that Bradley powertrain can provide. And the power demand as we add more and more systems just continues to go up as well. Furthermore, it's things like just being an old system like that. It's got an older architecture. Like think about how different computers were in the 80s. Like that's a big difference when you go from then until now. So it got to a point where I think that the Army leadership decided that we couldn't upgrade the Bradley any further, and we needed a clean sheet design to incorporate that kind of changes that we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Adapting, taking, a venerable vehicle, but identifying that, hey, things have changed. We're going to adapt. The Army's looking for a partner to do that adaptation with, and we are one of the best in the world at creating those solutions to meet that battlefield of today, but also, like you said, leaving in, growth opportunities for the stuff that's going to occur that we haven't even thought of yet.
Yep.
And, the competition for space, weight, and power, and all that good stuff. But really, it's about it's coming to this vehicle with a clean sheet design, right? It's like, again, a vehicle built or designed 40, 50 years ago. It's a great vehicle, but if we build one like we're doing now from a clean sheet design today, born digital, born here specifically, an American-based solution for the United States Army, it's really something that's very tailored to our customers' need. And I think that's something, I'm really excited about.
Yeah, one of the big pushes from the beginning, especially when like this latest push starting in 2021, was called MOSA, which stands for Modular Open System Architecture. And that kind of goes hand in hand with a different thing called GCIA, which is kind of a similar idea. But the whole point of this modular approach is that they realize that these platforms have a very long lifespan. Like I was talking about, the Bradley back in the 80s all the way through now, they're trying to design something, or procure something rather, that will be able to survive decades into the future. And we can't, just as they couldn't predict what fighting would be like now, we can't predict what it will be like 40 years into the future. So this modular approach, the idea is that we're trying to set it up so that things are easily added into our vehicle architecture rather than having to totally redesign everything when we bring in, for example, a new site 10 years down the line. The hope is that the way that we're setting things up now, there's a good groundwork where we can build on top of what we already have and not have to totally redo everything from the ground up.
See, and that gets back to the whole idea of soldier-centered, right? What we do not want to have is to try to retrofit, take a long time to figure out how do we adapt a capability that we haven't even thought of yet and get it into soldiers' hands to make that difference in their mission. And so incorporating MOSA is just one aspect of how we do that and how we focus on, hey, how can we make this with the least amount of pain points possible to get those solutions into soldiers' hands fast? That's something we have a lot of good expertise on. Another thing that occurred to me as you talked about that, our manufacturing footprint here in the United States, something that occurs to me is we work with, our team of manufacturing sites and our extended supplier network, which stretches across many states, many congressional districts, bringing in all kinds of expertise. That's a mature system that has taken time to build and develop. And part of the advantage is it's reliable, right? And I think that for us, is a something that makes us stand out from the rest of the group. Our pack, if you will, our Wolf pack of professionals and suppliers and assembly folks and all of that really do that. So, what's your thoughts behind that in terms of that manufacturing footprint?
Yeah, well, I would say that we're right now designing a brand new vehicle from the ground up, clean sheet design, and that's a really hard thing to do. But I would say that an order of magnitude harder would be designing a brand new vehicle from the ground up, all that, and also at the same time trying to create that manufacturing infrastructure like you're talking about. See, manufacturing combat vehicles, we do that. We have been doing that for decades. That's not something that we're worried about.
Very cool. Yeah, a lot of it, is, if you think about it, some of this just take supply chain. Some of that is a relatively arcane, business, like the I'm air quoting paint that's on the vehicle, actually is a specific kind of substance that provides a certain amount of protection to the vehicle for things. That's not something you can buy off the shelf at Home Depot, right? So developing a relationship with a supplier who can produce that at scale, at quality, on time, to make sure we can deliver that vehicle to the soldier when they need it. That's not an easy thing. And it's funny to think about, like you said, stacking that on top of designing something from a clean sheet. And speaking again, and as listeners of this podcast, this WolfCast may know, engineering, not my cup of tea in terms of skill sets. I have a brother who's a physicist. I struggle with anything beyond basic math, which is why I'm good for this, because I can ask those questions that everybody may be wondering about, but who may not have the technical expertise to understand it. So, one thing that I wonder about is sort of born digital, right? We talk about that a lot, but what does that really mean in terms of that makes this vehicle different and helps us to deliver a better vehicle to the soldier?
So my take on what it means for XM30 to be born digital is that, like I was saying previously, a lot of these legacy platforms were done decades ago, before designing things with computers was like the way to do it. Like, for example, I think that probably the Abrams and probably the Bradley were probably designed with engineers at drafting tables, drawing out lines. And what we're doing is we're doing something brand new, but we're also doing different processes from what that would be. Like, we are starting with a CAD model rather than having to create a CAD model based off of physical artifacts. The system architecture is set up in Cameo, which is a software that it kind of includes a lot of features that make that work better for you. We're starting off with these kinds of digital tools that allow us to design the vehicle in that frame of reference, rather than having to start with a vehicle and then retrofit all of the artifacts back to match what the vehicle already is.
And fundamentally, to my sort of non-technical understanding, that essentially saves time, saves money, saves aggravation, allows us to deliver a better, faster, cheaper vehicle, sometimes cheaper.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's easier to change something when it is digital versus when you have the physical vehicle and you've got to go change that, and then now you've got to go change the digital thing too. Like, if we start with digital and then make it real, that's a lot easier than the other way around.
Yeah, so we've talked supply chain, we've talked our partners too. We're partnering with a lot of people there's a lot of partners in our Wolf pack. Key suppliers that are working some of those key subsystems that we then take and put it all together to create this vehicle that works when it's supposed to work. Can you talk a little bit about that? Some of our key suppliers and what they're helping to do.
Yeah, sure. So we have a lot of key suppliers that are helping us out with critical subsystems. A couple of the big ones that I could mention would be Northrop Grumman, for example, which makes the main weapon for us, and also our coaxial machine gun that goes alongside the main weapon in the rotor. Also, I could name MTU makes the engine, Sapa Transmission also makes the transmission. And those are two companies that are starting to set up more of a U.S. footprint. I could also name that, for example, we are bringing in some other companies that are part of the GD family. So GD Mission Systems is helping us to write software off of requirements that we write for them. And then also GD OTS, Ordnance and Tactical Systems, are subcontracting out the active protection system for us.
And really, it's, as I listen to that, that's, again, part of our secret sauce is that we find the right partners, but then integrating all of these systems to be able to talk to each other, to work with each other in a very tight time frame when milliseconds matter. And that really is what this is about, and what I think, Land Systems is the best in the world at, is putting that stuff together in a way where it works when it counts. It gives soldiers and Marines the power to win, right? And I can't imagine how complex that must be, particularly at your level, looking so widely across the program. Just getting all that stuff to work. There's a whole team behind you, I'm sure, that is part of that. So shout out to them.
Yep.
Very cool. Yeah. So what does it mean to you to work on this program, just personally? And part of our mission, like what brought you to the defense industry?
So one of the things that I really like about the defense industry is a sense of purpose that comes with it, in that the things that we are designing are matters of life and death. So the stakes involved are something that attracts me to it, is that we are saving soldiers' lives, American citizens. One other thing that I really like is that here in Southeast Michigan, there's a lot of, if you're an engineer, you tend to go into the automotive sector. But for me, one of the things that attracted me to GD is that we're not just working on door handles for 30 years or whatever. We're working on brand new combat vehicles like this, and it really gives you a chance to do something that really hasn't been done before.
All right. Well, is there anything else about XM30 you'd like to add that you think folks might want to know out there?
So we did, when we developed this vehicle, as Reagan mentioned in the survivability discussion, we had multiple soldier touch points, not just one, but many. So I spent a lot of time talking to these soldiers, drivers, gunners, commanders. I actually had a couple of events where I talked with Bradley mechanics. So we have a pretty good sense of the things that they like and don't like about the Bradley, and we did our best to incorporate their feedback over the course of that. So I think that when people get inside those vehicles for the first time, I think that they're going to notice and appreciate those little things that we did to help out the drivers and the gunners and the mechanics and everyone else that spends so much time on these vehicles.
That is what it's all about. One of our ways of thinking at Land Systems is we serve those who protect what matters. And what better way than exactly what you talked about, which is sitting side by side with soldiers and saying, hey, how can we make this vehicle even better for you? Great work. Appreciate your time today. And we will see you next time on the WolfCast.
Thank you.